Welcome to the Virtual College Exploration for all Pennsylvania students, sponsored by the Pennsylvania Association for College Admission Counseling and StriveScan. PACAC is a nonprofit association comprised of more than 1,200 school counselors, college admission counselors, independent education consultants, and other professionals responsible for guiding students through the important transition from high school to post-secondary options. Thank you for joining us. A few housekeeping announcements before we get started. You can use the Q&A button on your screen to type your questions to our presenters at any time. Your camera and microphone are off, so the panelists cannot see or hear you. This is just one of many different sessions happening, so be sure to check out the full schedule at pacac.org. This presentation is being recorded and will be available within about a week at that same website, pacac.org. I'd now like to turn it over to our presenters.
Are we starting with me, Kim? Is that the plan? Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Jeremy Lawrence. I am the assistant provost at West Liberty University. And I always tell everyone that even my own family has no idea what that means. So don't worry about that part of my title. I'm also a professor of English here at West Liberty. But in my current role as assistant provost, I get to work with a lot of other programs at the school. And one of the other programs that I work with a lot is math, because I do a lot of work with the placement and a lot of work with the general education component of what we do here at West Liberty. And so when they asked me kind of what I might be able to talk to you guys about, what immediately jumped to my mind is the issue of placement into your general education classes, especially composition and math, and just kind of where those things fit into a general education program. And then also, in that sense, what actually do we mean when we say general education? Because one of the things that I frequently hear from students and from parents when they're first coming to campus for their tours, I would say something about general education, and I could tell they didn't really know what I was talking about. So one of the first things I want to talk about is what that means. What do we mean when we say general education, right? So if this works, I will show you some slides here. Okay, so again, that's me, the assistant provost here at West Liberty. But what we're really talking about here primarily is general education. Now, at some schools, this is called general studies. At some schools, it's called the core, or pretty much there's dozens and dozens of things that the different schools call this. But essentially what it is the general education program. Those are the classes that every student has to take to get a bachelor's degree, although there are also general education requirements at two-year schools. So really everything I'm saying right now does apply to two-year schools as well, not just four-year schools. You don't have it in graduate programs. You don't have it in some professional programs. But if you're going for a baccalaureate degree, especially if it's a liberal arts college, you almost certainly will have a general education component, right? And when we say that, what we mean is, well, the definition I have here, and I've borrowed this from a couple of different places here, colleges and even individual campuses of the university. So sometimes what you'll find is, depending on the school you go to, at West Liberty, we have one general education program that everybody has to follow. Some schools, especially larger universities, individual colleges within the university might have their own general education requirements. For example, at a lot of larger schools, if you are in what might be considered a liberal arts college, then there's a good chance that your general education program might require a foreign language, whereas the general education component for a college of science might not include a foreign language. And that's just one of the many possible variances there. But again, the idea here is that the general education program are the classes that everyone has to take, all right? And as it says here, it can be anywhere from a third of your overall hours. So most baccalaureate, most 4-year degrees are about 120 hours total. So sometimes you might have as few as 30 hours in the general education program. You might have up to 60, depending on how the school is made up. So that in of itself is something that I know a lot of college students going to college, a lot of high school seniors, they don't know what that is. And it's understandable. I had no idea what that was when I started my school. I was like, oh, I have to take a foreign language. I didn't know that. I was a little horrified because I was horrible at foreign languages, but it worked out okay. But the key there is I didn't know. Okay, I didn't know. So do know that it pretty much, unless you're going to a professional program, a professional school, the odds are you will be required to take general education classes. And this will vary. Again, keep that in mind. This will vary quite a bit. And that's also important if you transfer from one school to the other. Don't worry about that too much. But what kind of classes are we talking about in a general education? Typically, the most common groupings in general education, pretty much every general education program in the country, as far as I know, has a composition requirement. You will have to either take a composition class or get credit for a composition class through something like advanced placement or some kind of AP exam. And for composition, specifically AP language, right? So pretty much every school requires composition. That's standard. Mathematics, again, that's like maybe 98% of the schools require a mathematics class. Some have some kind of variance of that. So not all of them require specifically a math class, but that is true, again, of pretty much 98% of the classes out there. You would have to take a math class, regardless of whatever your major is. If you are majoring in gardening, you will have to take a mathematics class. Everybody has to take one. It can be a little complicated because there are a lot of different math classes. We'll talk about that. Most gen ed programs include some kind of natural science class, chemistry, biology, physics, and often you need to take a lab as well. You often need to take a lab as well. So some programs you have to take 2 sciences, some you only have to take 1, some you take 1 without a science lab, 1 you take with a lab. This can all vary. But that's a very common one. The social sciences, these are things like political science, geography, sometimes criminology, CJ, things like that. These are considered the social sciences, and that is frequently required at a lot of schools. But again, that can depend. And actually, what's really confusing, guys, is that something might be considered a social science at one school and considered a humanities at another school, and vice versa. So that can be confusing as well. That can be a little confusing. So there's typically a social science requirement, and there's typically a humanities or fine arts. Humanities, we're talking about things like literature. Literature is very common. That's probably one of the most common ones that's also up there, a literature class of some kind. History, also history kind of goes back and forth between social sciences and humanities. Philosophy would be humanities. A religious studies class would be humanities. And then things like the fine arts, these are art classes, theater, things like that. There's some kind of creative type of music you will often find in the fine arts. So those are the 5 categories. There are others. There's sometimes a global awareness type of category. Some schools even require some kind of service project as part of your general education, especially if you're at a private, often some kind of private religious institution. They often have different components like that. But that's what we mean when we say general education. And so if you don't get anything else out of what I'm saying today, hopefully that really simple thing there will help you, because like I said, I know from experience that a lot of people don't understand what that is. They don't recognize that. And it's pretty important because that can be up to 50% of your overall college experience, depending on where you go. So it's important to recognize what we're talking about when we say general education. And remember, that might be called general studies somewhere else. It might be called the core somewhere, but that's what it means. That's what it means when we say that. So I told you that composition is one of the most common, and it is. College composition is easily the most common requirement in gen ed. I don't know of really any program in the country that doesn't have a composition requirement. Now, the difference is some schools only require one composition, some schools require two. And that's true. One of those, you don't have very few require more than that, although some might require a writing intensive class down the road. But typically speaking, you're going to take two composition classes. That's the norm. The norm, the most common thing is that you will have to take, and I put college composition one. Once again, this is called different things on different campuses. It might be freshman composition one, freshman writing one. Some call it rhetoric and writing one. This is going to vary from school to school, but this is the most common type of way of doing it. The college composition one typically focuses on the fundamentals of writing. This is the course description that we use at West Liberty. This is by no means the description that everyone will use, but it's pretty close to the most common definitions you'll get. Basically, you're learning how to write a college paper, right? And we could talk for a long time about what I mean by college paper. But again, I'm an English teacher. We could talk about that for a long time. But the college composition one is where you're hopefully developing those skills that you learned in high school and preparing yourself for the type of writing that you will do in college, right? Not necessarily more difficult, but it's just different focuses and different ways that you go about creating papers. And in a lot of programs, you will start to look at research, the research process. That might be a little more heavy and depending on the program. We don't do as much research in our college composition one. Some schools do. Some schools do a significant amount of research in their college composition class. That's going to change from school to school, but almost everyone has at least one college composition course. There's also very common that you have a college composition two, right? A college composition two, and more often than not, this is a very research-oriented class. Again, not 100% of the time, but often the second composition class that you'll be required to take, more often than not, it will focus on research. Some of you will go to schools where there's a specific composition class for your intended major. So there might be a composition for the sciences or a composition for education. Some schools do that. It's not as common, but typically this is what you see. Now, some of you, if you take AP classes, okay, if you take AP classes, you might start in college composition one, depending on what you scored on the AP Lang exam. I'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a second. But the most common way of doing composition in colleges and universities, college composition one, college composition two. Now, some of you will see something along these lines, an accelerated college composition course. And the easiest way I can explain this is kind of think of this as a combined college composition one and college composition two. This is a one semester class, and the schools who do this, typically you have to do one of two things. You have to take college composition one and college composition two to fulfill gen ed, or you test out of college composition one and then take college composition two to fulfill your general education requirements, or you can get credit for accelerated college composition and take care of all of that. All right, take care of all of that. It's basically taking the place of college composition one and two. Now, some schools, that's all you're going to have. That's the only option you have, will be a single semester course. And if you do that, you're almost guaranteed that you'll be writing a research paper in that class. So some schools, you will only be required to write one college composition, will take one college composition class. And I use the word accelerated here. You might see things like advanced instead of accelerated. But the key there is that this is one you have to be able to show proficiency to get into these classes. Typically, the placement is you have to have a higher AP score or high school GPA. You're going to see a lot more schools relying more on high school GPAs for their placement. Some of the schools that you'll go to won't even look at high school GPA when they place you into something like composition or math, but you're starting to see more of that. You're going to be seeing more of that. But so for example, at West Liberty, if you have at least a 29 on the ACT, you can take accelerated composition, right, and fulfill all of your requirements, right, or something like that. Uh, so at West Liberty, so if you go to a school that only requires one composition class, and that's their composition class, if you come to West Liberty, we give you credit for this class to fulfill your gen ed requirements. So there are a lot, and those aren't really the only three ways you can have a composition class in college. Those are the three most common, the 1-2 sequence, and then the single composition requirement, right? So that's what you'll see. Now, in terms of things like advanced placement, this is not an exact science either. This is going to vary from school to school, and you need to be aware of that, because some people think that, well, if I get a score on this, then I'm automatically going to get credit. It doesn't always work that way, right? So AP language is what is used for composition. A lot of people look at AP English literature. That is not a composition course, all right? That is, in some ways, it's a more difficult course, but that will get you literature credit, all right? Some schools will give you composition credit for the AP literature exam, but that's not common. That's not common. Some schools will do that. They might say, okay, you got this on the English literature, we'll give you credit for composition 1 because you have to be able to write pretty well to get a good score on literature, but probably not. So when I talk about AP English for composition, I'm talking about language, AP language. Now, you typically have to get at least a 3 to start getting college credit. So at West Liberty, if you have a 3 on the AP exam, you get credit for college composition 1. Some schools, you have to get a 4. Some schools, you have to get a 4 to get credit for composition 1. Now, college composition 2, it might be a 4, it might be a 5. So again, this largely depends on the schools. And then the accelerated college composition type thing, if it's a single college composition class, 5 is common, although honestly, I probably could have put even 3 to 4 on that as well, depending on an accelerated class, you need a high one, but if the college only requires one composition class, like would be college composition 2 at other places, 4 to 5 will probably suffice, right? So these are the things that are used to place you into your classes in composition. Other things are ACT scores and SAT scores. You have to look, those vary so much. There's really no way I can even really show you a page of that because that's just all over the place. You have to look at what the school you're going into requires for placement in that regard. But just to kind of give you an example, at West Liberty, you need to have at least a 17 on the ACT to get into college composition 1, and you would need at least a 20, believe we are at 25 to get into accelerated college composition. We're changing this up as well as we look at the data, but that can vary. But just know that that's what's being used to place you, and that's why you're being placed, right? And that's why you're being placed. Now, math can be a lot more complicated because there are a lot more math classes than there are composition. I told you typically in composition, you have a 2-semester sequence and everybody's typically taking the exact same composition class. Math, however, is different. There are a lot of different math classes and variances. And this is really one of the things I want you to probably take out of this presentation the most, because this is, if Gen Ed is confusing, math is probably the most confusing part, because everybody has to take composition. Everybody has to take probably a social science. Everyone has to take something like a literature course. And if you take those classes, more often than not, you're checking off the box in Gen Ed. Now, some majors do require you to take specific Gen Ed classes. And again, that's something you need to be aware of. Some classes, some majors, some programs require specific Gen Ed. So they might say you have to take a literature class, or you have to take a foreign language class if you're going to major in English. Right? If you're going to major in English, you have to use a foreign language class to count as your humanities credit, or you have to take it in addition to the one you took, right? Math is the one that's going to vary because there are a lot of majors require specific math classes, right? So why that's important is you need to come in to your 4-year program and 2-year, understanding what kind of math class am I most likely going to be required to take, right? Now, there are some programs like English that they don't really care what math class you take. If you take a math class, check, you're good. But there are other programs that do require specific types of math classes. So a lot of you will see classes like the nature of mathematics. That's, this again, it's just kind of overall general broad sweeping class of math, not anything really specific. You'll see different teachers. A lot of times this teacher will teach it this way, this teacher will teach it this way. But the nature of math, these are typically things like English, arts, because in fine arts, you don't really necessarily need a calculus class to do what you're going to do in a fine arts class. You don't need a geometry class in if you're going to be an English major, right? Now, if you took those courses, most of the time, if you take those courses, your math class is taken care of and you don't have to take another math, right? If you major in English and you come to us and say, hey, I got credit for calculus, we're not going to say, oh, well, you have to go take math 102 to get your gen ed. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. The other one that you're going to be seeing more of, this is called a college algebra with applications. It's not a college algebra class, right? It's not a college algebra class, but I mention this because you are going to start seeing more and more of this at the colleges that you may go to. And the college algebra with applications, what this class is especially designed for is to give students a basic broad knowledge of algebra and then being able to apply that knowledge to specific types of problems and situations. This is a very popular type of algebra class for business programs and business majors, and also education. You'll see a lot of education where their students need algebra, but they don't necessarily need college algebra. So you're seeing this more frequently now. It's a lot of you won't see this, but it is there. Pre-calculus is the other class that you frequently see. This is the kind of class that you would need to take if you're going into one of the natural sciences, biology, chemistry, things like that. And obviously math, if you're going to major in math, right? So this is the pre-calculus. If you're majoring in biology, if you're majoring in chemistry, they're not going to want you to take this class. They're not going to want you to take Math 102. And if you took Math 102, then you're probably going to have to jump into and go ahead and take pre-calculus. And there's a good chance you're going to have to take upper level math classes as well, right? So pre-calculus classes, if you're pretty sure that you're going to be majoring in one of the natural sciences, you probably need to be looking at something like pre-calculus, right? It's Math 145 here. These numbers that I'm giving are just examples. These can change from place to place. But again, the key there, guys, is if you are thinking about majoring in a natural science, make sure you're getting into either a pre-calculus class, college algebra, or calculus, right? If that's what you're thinking. If you're thinking about a natural science and you're assigned to a mathematics, nature of math, you need to maybe rethink that class, right? There's maybe some placement issues. If you need the help though, sometimes taking those classes can help prepare you, right? So let's say you are going to major in chemistry, but your math scores in high school weren't as high as they should be. Your ACT scores weren't high as they should be in math. Maybe you just had a bad day. You can look into that and talk to them. Maybe they can place you into this. Or if you think you need it, you can go take Math 102 to help prepare you more to take something like pre-calculus, right? The other one here, Introduction to Statistics. This is the type of math class that is required for things like the health sciences, nursing, for example, athletic training, but also a lot of the social sciences, things like social work, criminal justice, sociology. Those majors want you to take a statistics class, right? Sometimes if you go into those majors and you've already had a calculus class, they'll say, okay, you're good. But some of those will still want you to take a statistics course, all right? So really, guys, the key to that, all of this is the math class can vary a lot from place to place. So when you go into college, your very first semester, all right, your very first semester in college, if you know what your major is going to be, and most of us strongly suggest that you pick a major from the very beginning. There are a lot of pitfalls when you start undeclared, when you start undecided. It's typically better for you to, even if you don't stick with that major, which I'd say half the students often change their major, start looking at a specific major. That's important because if you're undecided, and you don't know what you're going to major in, they might say, okay, well, let's put you into Math 102. You're not sure what you want to do. Let's put you in Math 102. But then you ultimately decide, you know what, I really like that criminal justice class I took. I want to major in criminal justice. Well, now for criminal justice, now you're going to have to take statistics, right? And again, this, I say you have to, this depends on the school, right? Now you're taking that, now you're taking another class maybe you didn't have to pay for, but maybe, you know, it's going to take you a little longer to get all your hours. And that just might happen, right? You might say, I'm going to take CJ and take statistics, and then you decide you want to major in chemistry. Well, now you're probably going to have to go take pre-calculus or college algebra, right? So sometimes you can avoid not taking the right math class. But if you're saying to yourself, okay, I don't know what I want to major in, but I kind of like the idea of the social sciences, you know, things like political science, criminal justice, social work, you're thinking to yourself, I don't know what I want to major in, but I know that I'm kind of interested in that. Well, then if that's the case, find out what math class those majors require and take one of those math classes, right? That's why that's important, right? So it does help to choose a major. Some of you are going to have schools where they have things called meta majors. That's a term you're going to hear when you get, and the reason why that's important is they've done things like group these classes together for you. So they will say, okay, you don't know what you want to major in. Well, do you think you're business? Do you think you're interested in education? Do you think you're interested in the arts? Do you think you're interested in the social science field? And they'll ask you, okay, you can't be undecided. Pick one of these broader meta majors is what they're typically called. And they'll say, well, if you don't know, but you think you're going to the health sciences, you're kind of leaning towards being a nurse, you're kind of leaning towards being in physical therapy, they'll probably tell you, take statistics, all right? So these, understanding the different math classes is very important because it can be complex, and it's a very important thing because statistically speaking, and I've done a lot of work in this area, statistically speaking, the composition and math class are the single most important classes that you need to take your first year, all right? You need to take those your first year, not to get them out of the way. I think a lot of people kind of see it that way, but those classes are so important in terms of building blocks, in terms of moving on. You're much more highly likely to succeed, to graduate in 4 years, if you take care of composition and math during that first year. So that's why it's important to, as best as you can, choose the right math class. Composition, you're pretty much going to be taking the same classes no matter what your major is, but the math class can vary. Spend a little time thinking about the math class, talk to your advisor in whatever major you're thinking about. If you cannot pick a major, try as best as you can to try to figure out what kind of area you think you might go into and choose the math class that best goes with that major, right? So that's really important. That's why I'm harping so much on composition and math. Now, advanced placement, there are different exams here, but once again, it depends on the school, depending on where you're going. There's a calculus class, and it's again, it gets complicated with AP because there are two different calculus classes. There's AB and there's BC. And what this, you know, you'll get different credit for different exams, right? If you get a 3-4 typically on the AB exam, you'll get 1 semester of college algebra. If you get a 3-4 on the BC, you'll often get the first 2 semesters of college algebra. It depends on the school. It depends on the school. There is a statistics exam, and typically a 3 will get you credit for introduction to statistics, right? So just know that what's true for one school won't be true for another necessarily. A lot of times the schools within a state try to line up as best as they can, but that's not always the case, even in West Virginia. All right. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about is co-requisite courses. This is something that a lot of you are going to hear about as you're getting ready to be placed into a class. This is kind of a new thing, but essentially what this means is, what used to happen is if you didn't have the test scores that you needed to get into a composition or a math class, they would put you in a developmental class to give you the skills that you would need to move up into the college class, like the composition 1, like the math 102 or the statistics. That's going away. You're not seeing that as often. You're not seeing many 0 credit, non-credit courses anymore. What's happening is, if you would have previously have been placed into a developmental course for no credits, what you're going to see more often is they're going to say, okay, we're going to put you in the college level course. You're going to go ahead, if you're in college and you didn't score very high on the English, we're going to go ahead and put you in college composition 1. You didn't score real well on math, but we're going to go ahead and put you in statistics if that's the one you need. But you will be required to do some kind of supplemental support. It might be extra hours, an hour or 2 with the professor. It might be a required tutoring session, but that's what that means when you see co-requisite. That can be confusing as well. And if you get put into a co-requisite course, don't get too down on yourself. You think, oh, I didn't have the right scores to get me into the non-co-requisite course. Because statistically speaking, we're actually starting to see that students who go into the co-requisite courses are sometimes doing better than the students who tested into the college level course automatically. There's a lot of advantages to being in a co-requisite course. So don't be down if that's where you are. You will be required sometimes to pay for another hour or 2. But if you think about it this way, if you were in the regular non-credit course before, you'd be paying 3 hours, you'd be paying for 3 hours of no credit and then paying for the composition course or the math course. But this way, you're at least getting credit for those hours. And sometimes you're not even, you might be paying for 4 instead of what you would have paid for 6. So that's what that term co-requisite means. If you see that term as you're applying for schools and as they're scheduling you, that's what they mean when they say co-requisite. Right? That means that you will be put into a credit-bearing class. Right? And I know I've probably talked more than I already should have, Kimberly and Joe, but
Oh no,
that's about 33 minutes there. So that's all I really have. If you guys want to jump in here, or if they want questions.
are there any questions?
Yeah. If I had to sum up everything I said, know what the requirements are at your school, find out what the gen ed requirements are at your school, and I would say automatically look at composition and math, because that's the core of almost every gen ed.
If anybody has any questions, please put in the Q&A for Dr. Lawrence. He would be able to answer any questions, especially the fact that he teaches classes. So if you even have some generic questions, please don't hesitate to put it in the Q&A for him. I'll give you a little bit of time to think about those questions for a little bit and pop them in there for him.
I was so thorough.
All right, if we don't have any more questions for right now, I'll introduce myself. My name is Kim Eisel. I'm one of the admission counselors here at West Liberty University. Been here approximately 17 years. In case you don't know anything about West Liberty, I'm going to hand it over to Joe. Joe, do you want to put your PowerPoint up real quick?
Let's see here. Can you see that?
No, not yet.
Let's see here.
West Liberty has approximately about 2,500 students. Our class sizes are relatively small. We have around 16 to 35 students, depending on the course. And we have professors that definitely give personalized attention. We are doing campus tours, and
There's a place where
I'm sorry. What did you say, Joe?
I accidentally started the video. Go ahead, Kim. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
You're still not able to see this PowerPoint, correct?
No, still can't see your PowerPoint.
Go ahead, Kim. Thank you.
Can everyone see my PowerPoint?
I don't see anything just yet.
How about that?
Yes.
Okay, great. West Liberty is established since 1837. We're owned and operated by the state of West Virginia. We're actually the oldest state of West Virginia school. Kind of an idea of what our campus looks like. Pretty much everything is all in one area, so it makes it very, very nice. We have some really new facilities as well. And then we have a new track and field center where we're located. A lot of people ask me this. We're located right here with that little part of West Virginia that a lot of people forget about. We're about 45 minutes from Pittsburgh International Airport, to kind of give you an idea location-wise. We have a whole bunch of different majors, including an honors college that we're very proud of. These are examples of some of our majors. If you have any questions about our majors, certainly put that in the Q&A session. I know we don't have a ton of time, so I'll just snapshot some of these so you have an idea of what we offer. Dr. Lawrence had talked about liberal arts. These are the different majors that we have in reference to liberal arts. And in our sciences, natural sciences and mathematics. We're pretty well known because there's not a lot of schools that offer a program what we call zoo science and applied conservation. We actually have a zoo approximately about 3 miles down the road that our students actually have hands-on experience with the animals, even as freshmen. Graduate studies, these are all of our different graduate studies that we have. We're very proud of our new one, which is our athletic training. We actually do have things for the students to do, which makes it very nice. And we're Division II for athletics. So other than academic scholarships that we offer also for these particular disciplines of sports. Students are not required to live on campus, but we do have dorm and apartment living right now because of the pandemic. Students don't have roommates. Dining services. West Liberty is one of the top 100 most affordable universities in the United States. We're very proud of that. Also, 90% of our students receive some form of financial aid. Tuition and fees, I get this question a lot, which is a very valid question. Right now, currently, for students that live in certain counties in Pennsylvania, we offer a metro rate, which is a discount off tuition, and that's per year. And then you would add room and board if you decided to live on campus. Out-of-state students, that would be for the non-Pennsylvania county residents. And that's found on our website at www.westliberty.edu. Our academic scholarships, we have a lot of students that have these particular GPAs, but then they also have to have the ACT and the either one, either this ACT score or this SAT score in order to receive this dollar amount for 4 years. Admission requirements, these are our admission requirements. They're also found on our website along with our catalog. Currently, we're not requiring ACT or SAT, only for scholarship reasons only. Students must have a 2.0 GPA or higher, and they must have these particular courses on their high school transcript. We just need the high school transcript. We don't need letters of reference or recommendation or an essay, and we don't require anything as far as a fee to apply. And then we do give credit for AP, and then we also give credit for students that have gone to a community college as an example, or taken online courses maybe through one of the colleges like University of Pittsburgh or Slippery Rock or Carlo. I know that's pretty common while you're still in high school. We do take those credits as well. Here's our contact information. You can always book me appointments or do Zoom appointments if you decide not to come to visit campus. We are having visitors on campus, but they do have to be scheduled, and they have to wear their masks, and they have to have, of course, the social distancing. Does anybody have any questions in particular? Joe, do you want to introduce yourself very quickly before we end here?
Sure. My name is Joe Wakeham. I'm one of the admissions counselors. Thank you so much for joining us today. Dr. Lawrence, thank you. Kim, thank you so much.
I do not see any questions in here at all. In the question and answer, do you guys want to place your contact information in case someone does have some sort of questions down the road?
I'm not sure if we can.
It does not look like we are actually able to put our contact information in there.
I'm pretty easy to find.
Again, our website is www.westliberty.edu. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our presenters. Thank you to all of you joining us today. When you close this window, there will be a link to a very quick 4-question survey. We'd appreciate any feedback you can provide. Also, this was just one of many sessions being hosted. So be sure to sign up for additional sessions at pacac.org. In about a week, you'll be able to find this session's recording as well as all of the other session recordings at pacac.org. Thank you so much. Thank you again to our facilitators, and have a wonderful day.